Hello, everyone. Welcome to NeoSystems Coffee Break series on NeoFlow, our standardized pre-built best practice workflow solution that builds on NeoSystems expertise in system integration through the Integrify workflow tool. From mid-July through mid-September, we'll be discussing each of the 9 workflow applications that NeoSystems BPI team has developed. In case you cannot attend any of the other sessions, be sure to look for the recordings through each of the processes that we'll be talking about today. It'll be payables. We'll also cover billing, vendor maintenance, vendor ratings, employee management, journal entry approval, financial statement approval, employee workforce, and travel authorization. My name is Marty Herbert. I'm the practice lead for the BPI team, and today we're joined by Jay Kim to discuss NeoFlow payables.
Hello, everyone.
So knowing that NeoFlow itself is about standards, so the accounts payable workflow really provides a platform to process vendor invoices from invoice receipt through payment. So Jay, can you just give us a, kind of a quick run through of, what is the payables process and how does it work?
So the payables process is something that has been a big ask from almost every client we've ever interacted with. It's just your basic invoice process that every company should have and needs. So from the start, you want to receive your invoice, and then the next question is, who does it go to? What do you do with it? So with our invoice process, what we've done is we've kind of created a upload and queue process, which kind of initiates it. So you could have anywhere from 1 to 10 invoices at a time. And so an accountant would come in, upload their invoices, select the appropriate vendor. And once they've done that, the next thing you do is just click a button. And once that button is pressed, it'll start a payables process for each individual invoice that was uploaded. And so the interesting thing about that is now that's where we come in is we've kind of coded a bunch of things within the background that help make your lives easier. So just from the basis of the process, you'd come in, select what type of accounts payable it is. So if it's a PO, it'll be routed into a PO and also pull information from Costpoint based on certain rules and code. And if it's not a PO, we have another approval route for that in which you would go in. It would pull all that vendor information you selected beforehand so nothing is lost. So that kind of data integrity is a key point that comes in a lot. And another thing that was a big ask that we've thought was kind of a no-brainer was kind of a invoice amount check. So it'll check between the discrepancies of the line item total and the invoice total to make sure that A, there is no discrepancy, there's no variance, and B, that what you put in is what you actually need and want, so that when it gets to that final step of getting uploaded into Costpoint and having that final check, that it doesn't spit back out you saying, oh no, this is wrong, this isn't gonna let you put it in the system, because at the end of the day, that's what you want, is perfect information within a perfect system. So just things like that are what we've kind of learned throughout our experiences with various clients, and we've kind of built a standard process that is a generic sample of what everyone needs. And obviously, as you go from company to company, everyone has their own different rules in regards to thresholds is a big one. So most approvals have a threshold limit of who needs to see it at some point in time based on how much it is. For example, if it's $10,000, it only needs to go up to the senior level accountant. If it's over, let's say 100,000, it needs to be double checked by the CEO. And so these are kind of things we've put in place and kind of pre-built so that if it needs to have 2 approvers, 3 approvers, 5 approvers, it's all there that we can simply just flip on a switch and you'll be good to go and up and running.
So let me get this straight. We've got the ability to kick off 10 invoices at a time, from somebody like checking the mail. We can do non-PO and PO driven vendor invoices, and we're capturing all the approvals that are associated with it and then loading all that information into Costpoint.
Correct.
Okay,
And
so with that, then, if we're starting to load the information into Costpoint, a lot of what we've heard too, and part of the reason we looked at NeoFlow and building that out was, people like Costpoint, right? So this is pre-built specifically for the Costpoint platform and how it kind of lays over that system. Why not just use Costpoint? And why did we go down this route?
So as we all know, cost point is great. It seems to be the gold standard for best accounting practices. The only limitations with cost point are, specifically speaking, the checks and balances within its own system is kind of hindering itself. So when you're trying to upload an invoice, you can't check based on your project account and org, for instance, all at once. You have to go through various screens. You have to flip back, come back, go through various different screens and double check constantly. With a system like this, you can build in all those functionalities. So you can hypothetically put 10 different cost point modules on one page and be able to check between those things. And on top of that, since you're connected to cost point, that information is being directly pulled. And then thereafter, you can set up your rules so that, for instance, if you select the project, the account and org are already limited based on your search criteria, or we can even pre-fill them based on certain rules you want and need. So just small things like that that cost point didn't really account for are immensely helpful for all of our clients.
So all of the things that it does in terms of the workflow, and then you add into that all of the different validations from cost point. So, and I know this kind of goes back. So, we start talking about pre-built and standard and best practice. NeoSystems has a long history of, doing government contract accounting. So, a lot of, I know some of the work that actually started with this even predates your time at NeoSystems. But how did we end up settling on what is the standard for NeoFlow payables and how that applies to so many different companies?
I'll be quite honest. At first, it was a lot of tripling and falling, and who does it the best? How would it best fit? What's the cookie cutter model? So it was a lot of trial and error, and it was a lot of the same questions being asked, and that's how we kind of came up with that standard process. The various standards were: A, I need approvals, 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 approvals. I need to make sure that this is getting to the right person for the right reason. And then B, it was being able to easily check between cost point and the invoice. So a lot of situations you'll have the correct amount, but something might be a little off, and you wouldn't have the ability to ask someone, and not only ask someone, but have that kind of paper trail to make sure that it was asked and that it was answered. So that was a big one. And obviously accountability. This system keeps everyone honest. I think that is one of the most important things and biggest takeaways from the system itself.
Yeah, and I know traceability is one of the core functionalities of Integrify, where NeoFlow is built upon. And so to kind of fill in some of the blanks too, I mean we've done payables for some pretty big companies. Like Guidehouse and Deloitte come to mind, and those processes by and large are still running, in some cases exactly as they were first put together. And we've done similar things in so many different ways across different clients, that really, the overall goal was to take the best of each of those simple processes and combine them in a way that made it so that we could implement this quickly, because that's really the goal of NeoFlow, is to implement these quickly and kind of build upon, the different maturity increases that we've seen in these processes. But back to the cost point piece. So, we talk a little bit about, the core functionality of Integrify and what that kind of does within this NeoFlow. So NeoFlow being the application within the system. So what is it about Integrify and the combination with payables that makes it that much better than, say, a workflow in Costpoint?
So I would say first and foremost is implementation. A cost point workflow might take several weeks, various consultants, and honestly, there's not a lot of people in the industry that could create a cost point workflow. With this, it's already built. You just plug it in. flip a couple switches and you're already running. Uh, and the other piece with Costpoint is that Costpoint doesn't allow you to pull up multiple screens at one page. So you might have to be stretching yourself for this one invoice to double check various things and not be able to do your work as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible. So with Integrify, you have that feature I mentioned earlier. You can have as many screens, as many database checks as you want within one form or one page. So you can look up a vendor, look up your project account, or pull up previously historical data to ensure that this is the right invoice and that you're not duplicating. It has all those checks and balances pre-built so that you don't have to kind of scour the various modules of Costpoint to make sure that you have this one thing right. And
So,
also,
oh,
sorry,
no, go ahead.
the approval process is just amazing within Integrify in that you have everything marked and checked to the second. It's to a T. And with Costpoint's workflow module, you don't necessarily have that built in as well, just because of the routing situation that's built in doesn't capture all of the information that you would want it to.
Yeah, I know for me, so my former life as a DCAA auditor, it's kind of knowing who does what when every time it's done. And really kind of for me, seeing the payables process come together and having the complete end to end too. I know, when we started putting this together, yes, we capture the invoice and yes, we route it through approvals and we get all the data. I mean, the coding is done up front, which is kind of cool. But the other piece too is all the way at the end after we've vouchered it. Also when we're pulling that voucher information, we also have the ability to look up the check info. So you get kind of a complete picture end to end where currently in a lot of cases, people are out there and they have an Outlook message that has the invoice in it and nothing else. And then they have an approval in Costpoint, but nothing to show what that looks like. And then they have a check number that is related to the voucher, but you have to kind of piece together all of these things, whereas the payables is kind of a nice, neat package. And I know for me, one of the things we always said at DCAA and just in GovCon circles was, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. So and having, like you said, with the approval steps, having everybody who did it and when they did it and what they said and what information they were seeing really makes a big difference. So I know that, as we're putting together all of the NeoFlows, one of our biggest focuses was really on ease of deployment. And you talked a little bit about this, but we've rolled this process out to numerous clients. Some of them are replacements for other systems, and some of them are just kind of supporting their overall goal of being more automated. But when we talk about, ease of deployment and that kind of thing, in comparison to, any of the ERPs, but also, can you talk about, really how long does it take to get this set up and running and what that takes?
I'm going to be real honest here. It's really, really easy. It takes less than a week from the initial discussion all the way to the coaching and deployment ready process. So you're looking start to finish. By the time we have our initial conversation to the time you're ready to start running, you're looking about a week or less. And the very, I think the highlight of it all is that anyone can learn the system. So this isn't kind of a dump and run situation where, oh, here's a shiny brand new car, it's yours, good luck. We're there to hold your hand throughout the entire process and make sure that A, you're learning, and B, you're satisfied with the product you receive. And obviously there's so many features within the system, and the sky's the limit. For instance, you can limit on just about anything you can imagine. So we can create groups based on specific username info, and then create certain test users and any kind of variation of that. And we can limit each process or each task to certain people so that the right people are looking at the right things and the wrong people aren't looking at the wrong things.
So with that, especially when you talk about, approvers and kind of user setups and things like that, within the payables process, did we go through, and I kind of know the answer to this, but did we go through a lot of different ways of, how do we know who the approver is?
Right. So there were a lot of variations that we ran through. And so the most common one we saw, or kind of the cookie cutter model, was that we use a dynamic assigner to assign those approvers so that the person doing the initial check of the invoice based on those thresholds, the system will automatically assign the appropriate approver based on any kind of variation you have. For instance, some companies do it based on orgs, some companies do it strictly on a threshold, and so it'll get to the right person based on kind of those different measurements.
Yeah, and I know one of the we even had one client who was particularly tricky with, wanted to do it by org, where we had to add some extensibilities and things like that, to kind of make their payables process that much better for them in particular. So the flexibility, I know, is one of those things that, yes, this is a standard process for payables, and it is a pre-built, ready to roll package, and it will work exactly the way that we've said that it's going to work. And because of where it's built and how it's built, it also allows for some configuration beyond that standard, right? It allows for growth. And I know that was part of our goal too, was build the baseline process that is common amongst all of our different clients that we've ever talked about payables with, but then also allow for things like, some of our clients are pretty goods centric, and what happens when we've received goods or not received goods, as the case may be, or even subcontractor labor, in some cases, that option is built in there, that if you're using subcontract labor, if that is applicable to a given vendor invoice, that can be captured, and just the different possibilities beyond that standard. But when we put it together, and kind of thinking about some of our toughest, the biggest things that we had to really think through when we put together the payables workflow in its multiple iterations over the past few years.
So knowing that it took us internally 5 years to get where we are, it allows our clients to not have that heartache that we initially started off with, all the kind of tripping and falling I mentioned earlier, so that by this time now, you receive this product, it's done. They're to a T, obviously. We've gone through all the necessary mistakes to ensure that this is the best version we have for you. And it was a different concept or kind of feel every time. So nobody was the exact same, which was honestly very refreshing because it was a new challenge that we had to overcome and to ensure that everything we were doing was going to be for them, almost catering to that specific need because every client is different in their own way.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting, and this would be the point at which, I kind of remind everybody that, if you do have some questions, now that we're kind of getting to the end of the overall explanation about what payables is and how it is specifically in NeoFlow, make sure you use the Q&A portion of the chat. When we talk about, the process overall, and the different versions of payables, it's interesting. I know from my perspective too that, we had rolled this out to numerous clients and talking about kind of some of our internal struggles, with kind of getting this up and running. Thankfully, we've got some sticklers internally, and they really kind of pushed our development, and really continuous improvement on these workflows, so that every NeoFlow itself is really built on a model that is in use, and it's taking the best pieces of the best different best processes that we've built and making them pretty seamless across numerous clients. And again, easily deployable, rapidly deployable, that kind of thing. So we actually do have one question that's coming in. Let's see, it says, is it a good solution, or is this solution a good fit for all companies? So for example, my company's small. Is this the type of flow ideal for smaller businesses? And I mean, my initial thought is, yeah, it's a good fit for all. But Jay, what do you think?
I think we've created a process that's good enough for every type of company, big or small. So it has that kind of flexibility wherein it's built for the same company that has maybe one invoice a day or one invoice a week. And it's also built for the same company that might have 10 to 15 invoices a week or 10 to 15 invoices a day. So it can spread and expand with your company.
Yeah, and I would agree. I think it really serves as the baseline standard to get everybody from a smaller business who is thinking about, hey, should I do this? Number one, it's priced right. Number two, it's also expandable for those medium and large sized businesses. Like I said before, kind of adding on some other things. So I know I have one question about details like pricing and things like that. We'll absolutely make sure we send that out. We do have a pre-recorded demo. We'll make sure that you get that. And the start of the workflow is the vendor invoice itself. So there's two things that usually happen at the beginning of a process. So it says, did you say that the start of the workflow is a PDF of the invoice and that there's no manual entry needed? No, that not exactly. So with an OCR tool, if you have an OCR tool, this tool can also integrate with that and pull some of that data. However, this process is built for those companies that haven't yet made that type of investment. And it's built for, again, being able to track everything from beginning to end, but also being able to, code and see the invoice all at the same time. Make sure that the coding is correct. Make sure that the attachment of the invoice itself is then flowing through the process to the approver and that kind of thing. And then as it goes through, the entry in Costpoint is not manual. That is handled by the system. So invoice has been captured, the coding has been captured, the approval's been captured, and then it automates the creation of the voucher, automates the lookup of the voucher to then pull the check number and things like that as well. The invoice images themselves are stored in Integrify as part of the record. So the record of the process as the payables goes on is a full-on, what is referred to in the system as a request detail, but it's really an audit trail. So it shows who does what when, every step of the process, and every data point in the in that particular workflow. The solution itself, Integrify, is offered either in the cloud or on-prem. So both of those options are available. The application, the payables piece itself, is a workflow that goes inside of that solution. Let's see. So, would this be a good solution for small manufacturers? We have a lot of invoices. I mean, queue process, right, Jay?
Yeah. So we've done, I think, almost every type of company, and manufacturers are kind of a hot topic nowadays, but with everything that's been happening regarding COVID and supply chain. So manufacturers, bring them on. We love to see manufacturers. And yes, they do have a lot of invoices for everything you could possibly imagine.
Yeah, and I know that queue process up front that we talked about, loading in, 10 invoices at a time, makes it real easy for what we called it originally was the person checking the mail, right? Because maybe somebody is, monitoring the AP at, yourcompany.com. Maybe they're the ones that are kicking off this process. So that then all the AP clerks can then kind of code and move these things along. That's kind of how we do it, even internally. Or the idea that in a lot of situations where we've gone in, one of the first things is everybody, quote unquote, is getting invoices, right? From the PMs to the people on the ground to, there's not necessarily a centralized repository for how those invoices come in, as much as you may tell some people to do that. But even that allows the process itself to be kicked off by anybody to get an invoice into that queue to make sure that it's recorded, and that the system then proactively kind of manages that workflow to make sure it gets moved forward. So yes, volume of invoices absolutely can be handled. Again, the biggest piece of it is having the same process each time also makes it that much easier. And that's really what NeoFlow is about. And that's really what Payables is about too, is to be able to say, yes, we do the same thing with every payable that comes in every time that it comes in the door and every time we have to process that vendor invoice for payment. So it looks like our Q&A has kind of died down a little bit, which is nice, because we're actually reaching two things. We're reaching the end of the coffee break time, but we're also, if we see the little red light on my Ember mug is going out, so my coffee's starting to get cold. So I would encourage you, if you do have any other questions, if you need some more information, if you posted into the chat that you'd like some more, we will absolutely be reaching out to you directly. Otherwise, I encourage you reach out to us either through our website, through growahead@neosystemscorp.com. Otherwise, absolutely, next week we have our billing process that we're going to be talking about. So I invite everybody on today. Come to our next coffee talk next Tuesday, July 27th, same time, same place. Otherwise, have a great and productive day. We'll talk soon.
Bye, everyone.